Well, I think it's really important that the campaign for reform of our voting system is acknowledged by people within Parliament as well as outside of it. I've always believed in a very simple principle, which is that the votes cast in an election should broadly then be reflected in the seats that people win. And I think other countries do their elections in a better way than we do, and they've got better representative government because of that. Clearly, when you're in the House of Commons, people tend to quite like a system which has seen them all get elected to it in the first place, and there's usually quite a lot of scepticism about changing it. But there are genuine advocates for change within Parliament. I'm one of them. There are other people as well from all across the political spectrum, and it's very important that people know that. It's very important that they join with us so we try and eventually get our voting system changed to one which I think will be much more conducive to the best interests of the country. I think it's the one that is the most feasible route to reform. So we see it in operation already in the UK, in Scotland and in Wales. Many MPs are committed to the constituency principle of having one person represent the constituency in the first part of the election in terms of the direct election, and I think you would find it very difficult to change that. But I think if you look at how the Scottish system has worked or how it's worked in Wales, you're seeing much better representation achieved at elections, and because of that I think it's the most realistic way to tell people this is what it would look like if we're able to achieve change. We are trying to set up a All Party Parliamentary Group in favour of electoral reform. So that would be made up of MPs across the political spectrum and members of the House of Lords too, to continue the campaign. So we had my bill before Parliament, which got a great deal of attention. A lot of people watched that, particularly on social media. Now we want a group of people committed to keeping the campaign going, working with conferences like this, but also making sure people know there are MPs interested in reform. Well, they've got to tell their representatives how much they care about this. One of the things that always comes back to people like me is, look, you might have a good point, but actually people don't really care about this. People will say they care about education, they'll care about hospitals, but actually the rules of the game, how you run your elections, determine so many other things. And if more politicians were aware just how unhappy people felt about our political system and how it could be changed for the better, that would be a tremendously positive thing. The fact is, for a lot of people, when they look at the election in their constituency, they realise, and they're not incorrect, that their vote probably won't change the outcome of that. The majority of seats don't change hands. The political parties focus, therefore, on the marginal seats or the seats they think are competitive that time. And because of that, I think people become disenfranchised. And I think a system where everyone's vote would count the same, regardless of where in the country they lived, would be a tremendously positive thing. And actually, when we've seen in the past elections be very close, turnout does tend to rise. So when people really do think their vote will count, you see people come out to vote. And I think the culture of our country would change over time, and it would change for the better. Well, I respect colleagues who don't agree with this, but I think they are kidding themselves if they don't think there are big problems with our political system as it is, and I think they're kidding themselves if they think a lot of people were satisfied with the outcome of the election, not in terms of who won the election, I don't think that would have been in doubt, but in terms of how their vote counted and the representation each party got based on the vote that they got. There were clearly some real unfairnesses of the system. It was a particularly unfair election, even by historical standards. But I think we have to be willing to recognise that. Business as usual, I think, is over in British politics. You're seeing a tremendous appetite for change, and I think politicians need to reflect that and need to understand that. And if they don't, I think they'll run into trouble.